Hello to all my dear followers. Today I want to welcome you to a new chapter of What If Kurama Was Sent to the Past to Train Naruto? If you want a next chapter, just hit the like button. Now without further ado, I'll leave you with the fanfic.
The one downside of the henge was that it took chakra to maintain. This was not a particular problem for Naruto, as even though his variation took more chakra to initiate, it took even less chakra to keep up. The strain was negligible. Even better, the subconscious effort to keep it active apparently was small enough not to be disturbed in his sleep. Sleeping on a forest floor was a lot more comfortable when you were covered in multi-layered fur. The issue was that he didn't want to get up. "Come on, Kit, get up. We have more work to do." Naruto groaned. "Really? Can't it wait? Grab some breakfast. I have one more lesson to teach you before your chakra training." "Ugh, fine." It only took him a few minutes to find food now that he had permission to hunt as a human, and had access to his weapons. Still, it was a good exercise, and by the time he finished eating, he was fully awake and a lot less sore. "So what are we doing today? People watching." "Huh? What are you talking about?" "You are going to sneak into the village, and watch people." "Yeah, I got that." "Why? If you know how people look, you can create a believable, original disguise without the risk of copying someone. If you know how they act, you can avoid suspicion. Unless someone is actively spying, you can avoid detection completely." Naruto frowned. "Yeah, but this is a ninja village. Everyone is spying." There was a huff. "Less than you'd think. And besides, it's good practice for when you learn more mundane ways to disguise yourself." Okay. I already know how everybody acts, though. Not when they don't know you're there. Make shadow clones. Sneak in as a fox. Turn into a mouse or something. Nobody expects something they don't believe is possible." Naruto rolled his eyes. Fine. But if I get caught, this is totally your fault, you know." Kurama was right. While Naruto already had a very good idea of what his classmates were like, since they had gotten used to his presence over the years of contact, the villagers were not like this. It was alarming to see just how differently people held themselves, their faces, actions, even the way they walked was different. And there was just so much variety, something that Kurama made sure to point out to him. Nobody looked normal. It was the sure sign of something being wrong. Or the sign of a novice shinobi. Naruto actually noticed a few of those after a few hours of observation. The art of a disguise, Kurama told him, is to be just interesting enough that you avoid suspicion. Someone walked by that caught Naruto's immediate attention. Most people in the village he had some sort of vague memory of. At least the interesting ones. This man, though, was not of the forgettable type. He sported long, ragged white hair, and an odd sort of forehead protector that certainly wasn't listed when they were introduced in the academy. It was wider than the standard, and irregularly shaped, with little horns on the sides, and jarringly, had the kanji for oil on it. And his personality was certainly interesting. He was loud, grandstanding, and while Naruto was used to perverts, even fairly open ones like Kakashi, this man didn't even have to speak to a girl to make Naruto uncomfortable by proxy. His eyes and grin left nothing to imagination. Even civilians, who Naruto had come to understand as the least observant people in the world, were repulsed, and many even overcame their general respect and fear of shinobi to shout him out of their establishments. And then he looked directly at Naruto. His tiny mouse heartbeat skyrocketed and he slipped around a corner and quickly turned into a rock. What was that? His glance had looked almost casual, but there was something behind those eyes that was so incredibly focused. A moment later, a hand clamped around the rock. "Neat trick. Let's talk somewhere else." The voice was quiet, and he found himself tucked into a pocket. Only the conspicuous absence of any killing intent stopped Naruto from immediately turning back into a 12-year-old ninja boy. He even sometimes felt that from civilians when they found him out. Or noticed him at all. He felt a little from his classmates whenever he inevitably annoyed them with his pranks. But he felt nothing from him. He was suddenly tossed down on some grass, which he took as an indication that he should no longer be a rock. Naruto wasn't hurt from the fall whatsoever, but felt distinctly embarrassed at his spread-eagled pose. He did catch the look of mild surprise on the man's face, though. Nice work, kid. Not an illusion I'd expect from a genin. Rocks don't have chakra, though. Naruto grumbled. I know. I can't suppress it. More importantly, mice don't act like that. So, why would a ninja of Konoha spy on his own people? He raised an eyebrow. You mean like the ANBU? The man smiled. I like you. But you're no ANBU. So what were you doing? This was not the same man who was leering so openly at anything female that passed by. Naruto pointed at his forehead protector. Are you a Konoha ninja? I haven't seen a headband like that. He grinned wider. You don't know who I am. With a poof of smoke, Jiraiya was suddenly towering above him, standing on a giant toad. I am the sage of the great toads of Mount Myaboku, Jiraiya the Toad Sage. He struck a pose. It was exaggerated and dorky. Naruto blinked, trying to hide his surprise. Wait, Jiraiya. Something in the goofy pose struck Naruto oddly. He looked directly into Jiraiya's eyes. Pervy sage. His arms dropped from his outlandish pose, and his toad disappeared into smoke. Really, kid? How is this guy somehow the biggest idiot in the country and a genius at the same time? I can never tell with you, kid. What? Nothing. Still, the Hokage trusts this guy. So, you know seals and stuff. Jiraiya's entire demeanor relaxed, yet his eyes were much more searching. I might know a few things. What about you? Naruto shifted a little. Just how to make exploding tags, and storage scrolls. Nothing that special. That's as far as most bother. I assume you want to take things further. Yeah. So who was your teacher? If you self-taught yourself exploding tags, you shouldn't have all your limbs right about now. Naruto glanced at his stomach nervously. Jiraiya waved it off. Never mind that. Anything else I should know? Well, I did things properly. Learned what things did instead of just copying stuff. Jiraiya nodded. And just how did you do that? As far as I remember, Konoha's library was still rather lacking in the subject. My teacher. Jiraiya wasn't sure what to think, but carefully concealed that fact from the boy in front of him. Hiruzen had told him of the boy's interest in sealing, which was a wonderful excuse for him to come and make sure Naruto was handling the fox properly. But he was starting to understand why the Hokage's message felt so much like he was hiding things from his student. Jiraiya would probably not have believed him. So, what do you want to get out of the sealing arts? Naruto looked up, a feigned look of calm on his face. If Jiraiya hadn't been a master at infiltration and people skills, it might have even worked. What do you mean? What made you so interested in the most fiddly shinobi art there is? A person you admired? A skill that was too awesome to miss out on? Come on, everybody has something like that. I want to make my own seals. Why? Naruto looked down for a moment. There's someone really important to me. If I can learn to make a certain seal, then. His hands suddenly clenched into a fist. Okay, screw all this. I have to tell you anyway since I can't do anything without the key anyway. Jiraiya frowned slightly. This was exactly what he had been worried about, but he still needed the boy talking, so he said nothing. Kurama. Who is Kurama? That's his name. Jiraiya already had heard the boy talking to him. But it was good to maintain appearances, and it was also useful to know exactly how much he was willing to say. So Kurama's stuck in me. He can see and feel what's going on, but he can't do anything. He certainly could, though. That was the worrying part. Have you used his power before? His chakra? Naruto shook his head. Not yet. He was gonna train me later to use it without getting angry like him, but we didn't do that yet. A backup plan? No, that didn't make much sense, either. But anyway, I really didn't like that he didn't get to do, like anything. At first, I just wanted the seal off. But people wouldn't really trust him. And I'm not strong enough where people would think I can handle him. Does he know more of Minato's plan? So I thought, maybe I could make a seal that only lets us push chakra to each other, without either of us being able to take any. So it would have to be like, a gift or something. Interesting. And then I thought if there was a way to make his chakra go outside my body, he could have a body of his own without, killing me, you know. Jiraiya tensed, and this time Naruto noticed. Hey, that stuff would still be controlled by the other seal, and it would have to go through my body. So if it really got dangerous I could shut it down. So it makes people less nervous. It didn't matter how controlled it was. The Kyuubi was the Kyuubi. Not many people would just accept that Naruto wanted it to roam free. It was hard enough for them to accept Naruto himself as the container. There was also an additional problem. Sorry, kid, but a seal like that is impossible. Naruto froze, then looked at his feet. Oh. He looked back up. Why? Each of those concepts are possible, with a little work and ingenuity. Combined, they represent what would easily be an entire life's worth of work. Maybe several. The complexity of a seal gets more and more unmanageable the more you ask it to do. Not to mention that it has to contain one of the most singularly powerful forces in the world. Slowly, a smile came back to Naruto's face. So, the first part is still fine. The gift seal. Jiraiya gave him an uncomfortable smile. I suppose. The smile's intensity increased. You're a seal master, right? So you can help me with it. The sage immediately frowned. I'm not going to spend over 3 months of constant work just to add more anxiety to my life. He softened slightly at Naruto's look. Look, kid, I get that you trust the fox. Even I can see that the beast isn't acting as murderous as he usually does. But this isn't something I can just hope for the best with. Naruto sighed. Okay, listen. I'll teach you all you want to know about sealing, as long as you promise me 2 things. 1, that you don't activate an untested seal without me looking over it. Well, duh. Jiraiya rolled his eyes and restrained himself from retorting. 2, even if you complete a satisfactory replacement, I must have good reason to believe that the Kyuubi won't immediately escape while we actually perform the replacement. Naruto frowned again. That didn't seem likely, at least in the short time frame he was aiming for. Trust wasn't easily gained even with normal ninja, let alone a formerly murderous force of nature. So, what if we put another seal around the place that makes it impossible to gather chakra? Wouldn't that work? You know about chakra suppression seals? Naruto shrugged. Kurama just said seals could do pretty much anything. So that's a real thing they can do. Jiraiya took a deep breath. You, kid, are absolutely infuriating, and also exactly the type of mind that will go far in sealing. Unfortunately, such a seal applies to everyone equally within the area. And it is impossible to apply seals without chakra. Can't you, gather the chakra outside the seal, then go inside the seal and release it? Jiraiya really didn't care for this particular conversation. It was making him look a lot less competent than he actually was. Yes, I suppose that would be possible, if the suppression seal was modified from the normal combat variety. Naruto's grin returned with a vengeance, and his body relaxed in a way that almost made Jiraiya insulted, as if he wasn't dangerous enough to be a threat. You weren't supposed to trust someone that fast. He was an S-class ninja, damn it. Alright, kid, you got me. But you have to do all the work for it. Naruto beamed. Alright. So what are you gonna teach me first? Just because Jiraiya had been completely and thoroughly outmaneuvered didn't mean he was going to give up. Naruto was going to be an awesome apprentice. And he did say that when the Kyuubi was going to train him in using his chakra, he was allowed to watch. Naruto still kept calling him Pervy Sage, though. Now, before we get straight into sealing, there is one ninjutsu that I want to teach you, that has many connections to the sealing arts. Not only is it very useful on its own, but if you take some of its principles to heart, you may eventually be able to apply simple enough seals with a touch of chakra. Naruto's attention was now thoroughly focused. If he was going to be a speedy fighter like his father was. Alright. So what is it? It's called the summoning technique. Let me demonstrate. Watch closely. He bit his thumb, then smeared the blood against his left palm, before making a few hand signs and pressing his blood-smeared palm against the ground. Seal script spread out from the hand, written in that blood. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. Naruto jumped back from the smoke. Hey, that's the frog from earlier. The frog in question extended its tongue, depositing a scroll into Naruto's arms. The summoning technique is a jutsu that is almost perfect for you, Naruto. It is rare among ninja due to the large chakra cost needed for the summon to be useful in direct combat, but your chakra levels are more than capable of handling it, without crippling your own combat ability. Something rustled in the woods, but Naruto ignored it, fully focused on his new teacher. Jiraiya gestured towards the scroll in Naruto's arms. That is the contract scroll of the toads. Simply sign your name in blood, then make a fingerprint impression with all the fingers of your hand. Naruto opened the scroll, eyes skimming over all the past names as he found an empty space. He bit his thumb, and reached out. Growling. Naruto paused. That sounded an awful lot like an irritated Kurama, but Jiraiya was looking off to the side. Naruto followed his gaze. Oh, it's just him. There was a red fox at the edge of the clearing. Naruto recognized him, though, since he was the first fox that he had come across in the woods. And became his template for correcting the mistakes he made when transforming into a fox in general. They both left each other alone, but he sometimes saw the fox watch him hunt. Well, his hand was going to heal soon, so he brought his thumb back to the scroll. Grr. Jiraiya snickered. Naruto, do you know this guy? Naruto looked back up at his teacher. He would probably have to bite his thumb again, and the blood was drying already. I guess. He shrugged. He turned his thoughts inward. Kurama, is there something wrong with the toad contract? No. I never much liked the bastards, but they are decent, I guess. Naruto put his hand down. Oh. He looked back at Jiraiya, who was looking at him with interest. So, is the contract thing really important? What happens if I do the jutsu without it? There was a slight frown, and he sighed. It was rather disappointing that he had yet again lost someone to pass down the contract to. It's dangerous, kid. So what does it do? He rolled his eyes. Theoretically, it isn't dangerous at all. Either it fails, or it succeeds and transports you to the realm of the summons that you are most compatible with. But summons, well, not all of them are friendly, and in almost all cases, there will be creatures that are much more powerful, and much more experienced than you. They will likely test you, and depending on the summon, you could easily die. He looked back down at the scroll. Oh. Hey kid. Why don't we train with my chakra? Make sure the old pervert has some reassurance. Naruto grinned. Hey, pervy sage. I have an idea. Jiraiya knew what Kyuubi chakra felt like. It was thick, oppressive, and with so much concentrated hate that almost anyone would classify it as pure evil. This was not what Naruto's new chakra felt like. Not at all. Naruto's physical changes were about what he expected. He had seen similar on Kushina. His eyes were slitted, his teeth were just a little more sharp, his whisker markings were more pronounced, and his posture got just a little more feral. But the chakra was strange. It did not surround him like a cloak. It was not a dark red. It looked almost like Naruto's own yellow chakra, except just a little more orange. And rather than the heavy, oily cloak, it danced around him, barely even showing itself. It was bright. It flashed like fire. And apart from a slight narrowing of the eyes, it didn't seem to be affecting Naruto's mental state much at all. If Jiraiya couldn't feel just how much power was radiating from the boy, he would have thought that the fox wasn't giving him much at all. A ruse or not, it was a big indication that for now, the fox was actually playing nice. And then Naruto took out a kunai and slashed his hand open. Jiraiya was on him in an instant, grabbing both of his wrists and pinning him against the ground, knocking the weapon out of his hand. Sensei. Naruto. What were you doing? Recognition flashed across his face. Oh. Yeah, sorry about that. I wanted to see if I healed any faster now that I had more of Kurama's chakra. His eyes darted towards the hand in question. And it worked, see? He gave a little wave. Jiraiya released him, and stared. The hand was still covered in blood, but the actual wound, deep as it had been, was completely missing. Naruto wiped his hand on the dirt. So, can I try the jutsu? Not unless you can prove to me you can fight like that. Come at me, and I'll see if you're ready. Truthfully, Jiraiya doubted it. True, his healing factor was quite impressive, and was the one thing that didn't make him just dismiss the concept outright, but even without the Kyuubi, Naruto already had more chakra than he knew how to deal with. But that healing ability told him that the chakra that swirled around the kid in front of him might have additional effects. It took only a few exchanges for Naruto to understand that Jiraiya was not just a capable spy, but a capable fighter too. It took only a few exchanges after that for Jiraiya to understand that everything about the kid was somehow enhanced by the chakra that flickered around his body. His strength, speed, endurance, everything was a grade above what it should have been. His technique was still a little sloppy, a mix between academy basic kata and some improvisation that made him actually pose any sort of danger, and he didn't seem to know any combat jutsu whatsoever. Which was to be expected, but it was a thought that was relevant because in everything else, he was easily Chunin level after the boost. And then he sped up. Jiraiya almost got hit in his surprise. He was still able to keep up, of course. But this was, oh. Naruto suddenly stopped, a huge grin on his face. It worked. It was the Shunshin. The long, slower version Naruto had been practicing. But it was about 4 times as fast as before. It also scaled to his new speed. How did you do that? It was a good question. Naruto did not have the Sharingan. He did not have the years of experience that his father had. I noticed my eyes were, like, really good. And I was noticing things faster when you were attacking back. So I tried my new jutsu, since I can heal really fast if something went wrong. And it worked. He jogged rapidly in place, yellowish-orange chakra flashing at his feet. Jiraiya let out a long breath. He had been fully prepared to deny Naruto his wish until he was more prepared. He had a speech ready and everything. But the summoning jutsu was useful, and really something that would form the base of a lot of battle-ready seals. It was an important part of his training, and something, unlike seal theory, that really needed a teacher, rather than just assigning book work to the kid. But like this, well, Naruto could fight a ninja far above his current skill quite successfully, even without any battle jutsu. Even if he couldn't handle the summons that he encountered, he would be able to run away. He would be more safe than he could have hoped. Safer than it was when he did the technique himself, certainly. All right. I'll teach you. But be careful, you hear me? Naruto's grin threatened to split his face. Yes, sensei. Jiraiya smiled. He hadn't even bothered to call him a pervert. All right. You saw what I did with my blood, right? Do the same, and after you gather your chakra, make the boar, dog, bird, monkey, and ram signs to mold it in the correct manner. Later, with practice, you'll learn how to mold it more precisely than that, and it will be a great lesson in sealing, but for now, your blood should do the rest. Naruto went to bite his thumb, but Jiraiya held up a hand. Wait. Just in case. He reached into a pouch, and retrieved a rolled-up map. Take this. Just in case. Naruto tucked it in one of the straps he used for scrolls, but gave his teacher a questioning looks. Go ahead. Jiraiya didn't tell him, but it was more assurance than anything. If his summons did not accept him, then he would at least be able to find the way home. He didn't exactly want to tell Naruto that he was that prepared for him to fail, though. Naruto slammed his palm onto the ground. Kuchiyos no Jutsu. And with that, he disappeared into a puff of smoke. Jiraiya sighed, fervently hoping that he did not just make a huge mistake. It was an interesting sensation, to be pulled through space. But Naruto did not have much time to dwell on things. He was sitting on a stone slab, with some worn, but interesting spiral designs. He was also in the middle of the woods. Woods that he recognized. He was still in Konoha. He looked around again. Okay, maybe not actually in the village. But there's no way this isn't nearby. But there definitely weren't any summoning creatures around. There was a sudden puff of smoke to the left of him, and he immediately fell off the stone in surprise. Ow, ow. Naruto stood up, brushing off dirt and leaves. But he froze as soon as he saw what was on the stone. It was a fox. The same exact red fox as before. Hello. It stared at him for about 3 seconds, then simply jumped off the stone and disappeared into the woods. He made to follow. His foot immediately was caught in rope as he was hauled unceremoniously up into the air. Naruto groaned. This was quite possibly the most simple and easy to find trap, and he got caught in it. He reached up with a kunai and cut the rope near the knot. He landed on his feet. A pair of eyes shone out of the forest. The fox was still waiting for him. He started again, this time paying much more attention. Simple traps littered the path in front of him, always just out of sight. Pervy Sage mentioned some sort of test. I guess this is part of it. As the prank master of Konoha, though, they were quite easy to avoid. And as he followed the fox in front of him, he always seemed to stay just close enough where Naruto could find him again. The traps got harder, though. Trickier to find, redundant triggers. There was even some that he had to disable to progress instead of simply avoiding. It was only when he just barely managed to duck a shuriken trap that he realized that this might be a bit more dangerous than he was expecting. The fact that he hadn't even noticed the pressure trigger beneath the leaves was also a shock. Then they got ridiculous. It became more of a test of reflexes than actual trap-finding ability. At some point, Kurama started to give him chakra. And then he hit a wall. Metaphorically, that is. He knew how to climb regular walls. The real problem started when the traps got just a little bit too fast for him. He had to pick various weapons out of his body regularly, and without Kurama helping him heal, he would probably have bled out a long time ago. The field in front of him, though, well, some of the traps weren't even hidden, and he knew that disabling them would be just as dangerous as running headlong in. Even with his shunshin, he was unsure he would actually be fast enough to survive. Think, Kit. That broke him out of his stupor. His oldest sensei hadn't said a single word since he arrived in this place. Stop thinking like a samurai, and think like a ninja. Otherwise you'd might as well go home. Naruto rolled his eyes. He had heard those words more than anything else. It was one of the first lessons that Kurama tried to hammer into his head. He was a man of action and deeds. He was also a man of pranks and being a sneaky bastard when the mood struck him. Getting him to treat fights like pranks was an ongoing project of Kurama's. More importantly, it was the concept that cheating was everything. It was at this point that Naruto noticed that only the clearing was actually trapped. There was nothing actually keeping him walled in the test. So he walked around it. He walked all the way up to the fox that was waiting for him. It gave him a short bark and vanished into the trees completely. Naruto's stomach fell through the floor. I just blew it, didn't I? He sat down on the cold grass and dirt. He didn't quite know Jiraiya enough to really feel guilty about disappointing him. He was one of the few adults that seemed to recognize him, but that seemed almost unimportant compared to how he felt about Kurama. The thought had grown for past half hour of testing. At this point, he was pretty sure. Unless the summons that he was doing this test for only employed foxes, which would be weird, the summons were foxes. Naruto loved his stomach's irritated inhabitant. He had been given stories of his real father. His mother, too. And while he loved the Hokage like a grandpa, well, Kurama was the only one who was always there. Always had time for him, even if he tended to complain about it. A lot. Kit. Kurama was the reason he wanted to continue practicing being a fox, even though it was a lot easier to be a person. And he would have had fox summons. Naruto. But he messed that up, just like he messed everything up when it was important. Naruto. The voice was a roar in his head. Naruto jerked his head up. The fox was back. He was sitting patently, looking Naruto directly in the eyes. In front of him was a scroll. What? Hands shaking, he opened the seal and unrolled it unsteadily. Empty columns of ink spread across his vision. Only 2 of them were filled, the ink smudged and fading. But the look was unmistakable. This was a contract scroll. He looked up uncertainly. The fox nodded. Go ahead, Kit. Naruto bit his thumb and tried very hard to keep his heart out of his throat as he carefully wrote his name. Finally, he spread his blood to his other fingers, and made the imprint. He looked up again. The fox sneezed. He glanced back down at the scroll. Right. Double-checking to make sure the ink was dry, he rolled it up again, and tried to give it back to the fox. Eh. He pushed it back towards Naruto. Naruto stared. Eh. You want me to have this? The fox nodded and pushed it again. The scroll was large, and almost tall enough to reach his shoulders, but it had a strap. He put it on, feeling completely out of his depth. The fox immediately started walking back the way he came. He walked through the field, somehow disabling all the traps he passed with just teeth and paws. Naruto followed with significant caution until he was back at the stone. He climbed uncertainly back on top of it, and before he could look back to the fox to see if he was supposed to do something else, he felt himself being wrenched through space. Oh, thank God. Jiraiya rushed over to check him for injuries, pausing once he noticed the scroll across his back. So, what sort of summons do you have? Foxes. Jiraiya surreptitiously rolled his eyes. Of course it would be. So they gave you the contract scroll? Naruto shrugged. I guess. Is that something special? You have the one for toads. Actually, it was something special, but he wasn't going to tell Naruto that. Gamma was actually the holder of the toad scroll. He just could summon him whenever. It likely also meant that Naruto was the only fox summoner at this point, and they trusted him to find others that might be worthy. Either that, or they knew where the Kyuubi was, and that the scroll would be safest with Naruto. It was difficult to tell. Did the Kyuubi even count as a fox? Let's just say that you need to keep that safe, no matter what. It was possible to create another contract scroll, but costly. For the summons, that is. It was impossible to replace for a human. Naruto looked slightly intimidated by his expression. I should probably go put this back in my apartment, then. He made to leave. It'll be safe with me here. Just don't take it on missions. And don't display it openly, unless you are prepared to teach a student of your own. Right. Naruto kept his face fairly neutral, but there was a glint in his eyes that both scared and excited him equally. So, are you ready to try summoning for real? Naruto smiled, and bit his thumb. This time he went through the signs much faster, and placed his palm on the ground with confidence. There was a poof of smoke, and the exact same fox stepped out. Naruto made a face. You again. The fox gave him a look. Naruto seemed to understand exactly what he was trying to say. Not that you aren't great or anything. I just was hoping to see what other foxes were like. Honest. Jiraiya was not surprised in the least to find that it was the same fox that interrupted the toad contract earlier. It was a meddling bastard, but it looked pretty much exactly like most entry-level summons. The fact that it would likely grow with Naruto was only a plus. So what's his name? Naruto stopped his one-sided argument with the summons. What is your name? Naruto snorted. That's what I thought. He doesn't speak, sensei, and I'm not calling him Aa. He's really good with traps, though. He speaks fox just fine. Naruto ignored him. Jiraiya nodded thoughtfully. It was a very Naruto summon. And most low-level summons weren't really useful to begin with, so it was quite the find. Good job, Naruto. I'll leave whatever test you went through alone. He looked up at the sun, which was close to the horizon. We don't have the time to start on our real sealing lessons, but there's one last thing I want you to try with the summoning jutsu. Sure, what? Focus all your chakra into it. The golden chakra too. Everything you can. Everything. Everything. That was one of the few things that was emphasized in the academy as a terrible idea. If your chakra was completely depleted, well, you would die. But with Kurama, that was pretty much impossible. Why? Won't that overload the jutsu? Jiraiya chuckled. The summoning jutsu is the only jutsu that is impossible to overload. Chakra and blood are the payment for the summoned creature. Go ahead, Kit. If you get into a fight you can't get out of, I want to know who I'm going to be fighting with. Alright, if you're sure. Besides, I'm here to help just in case they aren't friendly. Naruto sat down this time, gathering chakra before biting his thumb. It was a long time, too, since Kurama constantly fed him more and more. Just as it got to the point where he actually couldn't hold any more, he bit his thumb, made the signs to mold the chakra already gathered, and slammed his palm onto the ground. Naruto disappeared in a puff of smoke. And reappeared 2 feet in front of himself. Jiraiya gaped. Bullshit. Shit. Well, that's a headache and a half. Naruto rubbed his own head. Kurama. What just happened? You just summoned me, and brought yourself along for the ride. It's goddamn confusing to give yourself chakra, by the way. Naruto paused, the implication sinking in. He didn't even bother to keep his thoughts to himself. Wait, you're a summon. Course I am, Kit. The sage was powerful, and he could create life, but he can't create souls. He picked a few of his friends to keep that bastard's chakra safe. Ha! Worst mistake of my life, I can tell you that. Immortality isn't worth this mess. I don't know what to say to that. Wish that could have actually summoned you, though. Would save us a whole lot of trouble. Jiraiya looked alarmed in the background. And then you would die from the shock. Neither of us wants that, Kit. Right, yeah. Are there any other fox summons that are really big and stuff? Kurama gave a mental shrug. Wouldn't know. Probably. Lots of the high-level kitsune are pretty long-lived, but I haven't been back there in. I don't even know. A long time. Not everybody gets powerful enough to live that long, anyway. But you're the best fox. You have to know at least one other fox that was as good as you were. Kit, I barely had 2 tails. I didn't earn my power, other than being friends with the right person. Or maybe the wrong one. I don't even know anymore. He sounded distinctly tired. A detail stuck out to Naruto. He had heard of the Sage of 6 Paths, and decided that that was who Kurama was talking about. But... so where did you get your chakra from? There was a flicker of annoyance. Not now, Kit. I'll tell you later. When you're older, maybe. I don't want you worrying about it. Not when you don't need to, anyhow. Naruto frowned. Was it because of Jiraiya-sensei? And why would he worry about it when it was that long ago? Whatever. It's getting dark. He stood up, and Jiraiya gave him a slightly forced smile as he waved him off home. Jiraiya was worried about Naruto. No, he wasn't worried about the fox. Not as much as usual, at least. Naruto's casual attitude about the potential of freeing it completely was concerning, but after several weeks of daily interaction with its chakra and the effect it had on Naruto had slowly settled much of that fear. Naruto was a little more aggressive than normal, but Naruto had told him outright that Kurama was still a bit of an angry person in general, even though he still insisted that he was a good one. And he was almost inclined to believe him after the remarkable control that the genin should not have at this point. If the fox was trying to control him through the chakra, he would have noticed already. The worry was not one he expected to have for a student. Not unless they were as cold and emotionless as Orochimaru, or maybe as driven by anger and revenge. But if Naruto was either of those, Jiraiya wouldn't have accepted him as a student anyway. It was that he was too eager for training. When it came to sealing, he was studious in a way that his reports showed he certainly wasn't in school. And when he was training with Kurama's chakra, he never once took a break unless it was enforced directly by Kurama cutting off the flow of chakra. That was certainly an interesting sight to see. Now, both sealing and Kurama were passions for him, and he hoped that the reasons they were passions did not exclusively overlap, but Naruto didn't just push himself there. Originally, Jiraiya followed the boy to make sure he kept his promise not to practice the seals he hadn't gained mastery over and blow himself up. But as the days passed, he realized that what he saw wasn't a fluke. Naruto just didn't let up training at all. The boy wasn't completely without joy or fun, of course. The owners of Ichiraku Ramen were very nice to him, and he often stopped there for lunch after training with him. Or before training, when it was Kakashi that trained him with his team. And the times he went hunting were interesting. It was his reactions to the villagers that tipped him off that something was odd. Of course, Jiraiya was mad enough, watching how Naruto was treated. But it wasn't like he could attack civilians. And getting publicly attached to the boy could only attract attention that might get a little too close to the truth of the matter. Attach the right sorts of names to the right people, and Naruto would get a bounty on his head in no time. But he had read all about Naruto from the file Hiruzen-sensei gave him. He was quite the prankster when he was younger. Now, though, whenever he got that sort of glint in his eye, instead of immediate but relatively harmless retaliation, he darted into some sort of nearby training field and got it out of his system in more conventionally productive ways. Also a lot more destructive ways, considering. There were some prank-like executions in how he trained, but they were certainly not fit for a light-hearted jab, even if a shinobi was the target. He didn't play with other kids, or even socialize with other genin from his class, either. While he knew a lot of them did avoid Naruto due to their parents, he thought that a few at least tolerated the boy. At the same time, some of the uses he was finding for relatively simple jutsu were quite creative. And then Naruto got serious about training, and decided to just make 50 clones, spamming Shunshin until he stopped hitting trees. The real one did that toned-down version that just made him really fast and tried to pop his clones in passing. It really was a huge difference, without the fox's chakra. Naruto was at least 8 times slower, and barely reacted in time to hit any of his clones with kunai. Not to mention the clones themselves would periodically blur in and out of existence. More of them died by hitting trees than from kunai. Yet when he had that chakra, he could prove an adequate sparring partner for Jiraiya himself. Well, without using any ninjutsu. Or sealing. It still was impressive for a genin, though. But Naruto seemed to understand how much his clones would help him with training. It made Jiraiya almost envious of his chakra reserves. He was less envious of the mental backlash Naruto seemed to get after every batch of this sort of training, but at least Naruto had enough forethought to only do this type of training at the end of the day, so he could sleep it off. Or maybe it was just Kurama that had the sense. He noticed many instances that he seemed to pause, then return to training with a completely different angle. And Naruto did call him sensei. And when he was too tired from his own training, he would immediately start on seal work. Jiraiya almost stopped him the first time he brought out a scroll and ink, but it seemed that he just took the time to review the notes from his lessons, and practice his calligraphy. He was also almost tempted after these weeks to make sure he went lighter on himself, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. Naruto was the spitting image of his father, after all. And it wasn't the fact that his father was almost as studious. Minato was at least reasonably socially active in addition to his training. It was the fact that it wasn't exactly going to be long before some ninja that had seen his father in action would notice that his son looked pretty much exactly like him. It was bad enough that he was training the boy, and people might make the association just from that. Jiraiya sighed. Naruto needed to be ready for that. Which meant he needed good jutsu. Jutsu like the Rasengan and maybe even the Flying Raijin if he could figure out how his student had managed it. He needed to be ready for the people that wanted to kill him. And if he could trust what Naruto was saying about the fox, relying on his massive chakra wasn't going to cut it. Kurama smiled in his slightly damp cell. Naruto only gained the ability when they were working as one, but he could always feel the intentions of those around him. And if what he felt about the Toad Sage's mental state was correct, he might actually get off his ass and get somewhere with Naruto in a reasonable amount of time. This time around, they might actually be ready. This time around, maybe nobody had to die. Well, other than his enemies, of course. They could go to hell. Kakashi, I think it's time for a real mission. Naruto looked at Sakura with surprise. It wasn't as if she was wrong, of course. Sasuke's chakra-heavy jutsu no longer tired him out nearly as much, all of them had enough chakra control to fight on a river, and Sakura herself was getting remarkably accurate with her poison Senbon, even if she didn't quite have her healing jutsu in a state where anyone would be comfortable with it being used on them. It was more that Sasuke was the one that said that practically every training session. Kakashi looked at Naruto. Yeah, I'm kinda getting bored of just training. He gave a little smile. Of course, I would be happy to give you another D. No. He chuckled at the sight of all three of his students with the exact same mixture of horror and anger on their faces. I suppose I could convince the Hokage that you three are ready. Naruto punched the air. Yes. Though that all depends if there is a C rank available. If there isn't, we will be doing a mission regardless of how exciting it is. Naruto groaned. Sasuke rolled his eyes. Sakura nodded. I suppose that's fair. There will be many missions that you will not enjoy. And there may not always be some other team that is available to take it in your stead. So as of now, we will continue to take missions. Naruto gave Kakashi another pained noise. So it's back to D ranks again. Now. We aren't going to take a mission every day. Something like once or twice a week will be more than enough. We have to give other genin a chance for some easy income, after all. Naruto glared. And training. Kakashi chuckled. And training, I suppose. The trip to the mission assignment desk was short, and it took even less time to convince the Hokage that they were ready for a more difficult mission. And all three of them were well aware that while C-rank missions were certainly more of a real mission than D ranks, they weren't exactly the romanticized missions that were passed around in gossip among the village. Anything was better than menial chores, even when they were presented in a mission format. The actual client, though. Damn it. Why do we have to get the drunk? Naruto hated drunks. It wasn't necessarily the fact that they smelled overpoweringly like alcohol. It was the fact that they smelled overpoweringly like cheap alcohol. The good stuff was annoying, but at least it wasn't this. And it seemed that this Tsunade had a similar opinion about the three of them being kids. He also seemed to have a rather inflated opinion of himself just for being a guy that built bridges. All in all, he was a very punchable man. But he was the client, and they were supposed to protect him. Not punch him. No matter how annoying. Even if he deserved it. At this point, Naruto was almost hoping they got attacked by bandits, just to shut this stupid civilian up. At least the civilians in the village respected Shinobi, even if they were kids. Well, not Naruto, but that was more because they were afraid of him. And even though it sucked balls, at least he understood why. This was the first time that Naruto left the country, though. So that was exciting. They were only about a half-mile out, at an excruciatingly slow civilian pace, when he was struck with the feeling that something was wrong. Something smells off about that water. It hasn't rained. Naruto stiffened, and glanced at his other teammates. Either they hadn't noticed, or they were better at hiding their nonchalance. He glanced at Kakashi, and they made eye contact briefly. You three stay with the client. I'm going to scout up ahead. What? Why would he dash? He has a plan, idiot. Or he's testing you. Naruto tried to catch his teammates' eyes again, but it didn't work. Gur. Why do they have to be this clueless? That's rich, coming from you. I highly doubt that many Jounin sensei would teach fresh genin to be this paranoid. In peacetime, that is. You got me. Lucky you. Naruto rolled his eyes at the sarcasm. I like having you around, Kurama, even though I don't like you being trapped. So what do we do? Think it out. Right now, you have surprise on these ninja. The enemy ninja have surprise on your two teammates. Which is better? Oh. Naruto straightened up and tapped his teammates on their shoulders. Enemy behind, he whispered. It almost certainly gave away to the ninja behind them that they no longer had the element of surprise, but it was better than them actually having it. It wasn't like Naruto was their only target. And since Kurama made it very clear that he wasn't going to interfere unless Naruto was actually in danger of dying, he wasn't quite confident in his own abilities to say that he was worth two of his teammates. That was a stupid line of thinking, even if he was better. And besides, he worked best when he had time to set traps beforehand. Direct combat, well, he could barely match Sasuke when they sparred. Given how much time Naruto spent training, it wasn't that great of a showing. He had been using the time to charge a few more explosive tags, though. And attach them to his kunai under the pretense of hiding the act of scratching an itch. His little sessions with Jiraiya were already paying off. So when he heard the slight sound of water dripping off a pair of shinobi, 2 explosives were already in flight. As were a buttload of shuriken. And some poison needles. The 3 of them stared at the 2 very dead ninja. Naruto scratched the back of his head. Whoops. I guess that was kinda overkill, wasn't it? No, Naruto. You only limit your arsenal when your supply itself is limited. Or if stealth is required. Kakashi was back. The bridge builder didn't even glance at him. He seemed rather transfixed at the 2 bodies that were quite suddenly, not very intact. Or if the targets have important information. Naruto walked over to the bodies. He grimaced. Hunting was something he had done for years, and he was used to blood. He had even hunted with explosives one day, to very poor results. And with Kakashi's substitution jutsu, he had even seen an approximation of human death. It was not pleasant to see it for real. Not at all. That didn't stop him from recovering his kunai, though. They were the expensive, good type that weren't damaged by the level of explosion he had been using. And they were expensive. He looked at the forehead protectors and frowned. Hey, sensei. Kakashi appeared beside him. These look like Kiri-nin, but we aren't at war. What's going on? It is possible, but unlikely, that they were hired on a mission directly opposed to ours. It is more likely that they are missing ninja that have abandoned their village for mercenary work. Naruto made a face and continued to collect his teammates' weapons from the bodies as well. Unfortunately, due to the quick response from you 3, we don't know their actual target. Were they targeting us as Konoha ninja, or? He glanced meaningfully at Tsunade. Were they targeting our client? Tsunade started to sweat profusely. Naruto stood up, distributing his teammates' weapons back to them. Sakura made a face at the blood. Sasuke just nodded in recognition. Sorry about that, sensei. Kakashi waved them off. You didn't know the plan. And you certainly don't have the experience required to think of such a plan. He stared meaningfully at the bridge builder. We do, however, have another source of information. Tsunade gulped. It is one thing to be unaware of the difficulty of a mission. But something tells me there is more to it than that. You do know how serious it is to lie to a ninja village, do you not? The belligerent drunk was almost unrecognizable from what he was before. All right. I do have something that I should tell you. This is clearly beyond the scope of the original mission's classification. Not to mention the difference in pay. If we were to turn back now and leave you here, nobody back in Konoha would question our decision. But Kakashi looked over the rest of his team, and the 3 rather unimpressed looks on their faces. Though I suppose if there are no objections, we could also be convinced to continue. If, that is, we are compensated for an appropriate B-rank mission. Tsunade quailed. But I already told you. You may find that unlike some other ninja villages, Konoha is quite reasonable with those who cannot pay immediately. I'm sure you will do fine if this bridge of yours is as successful as you say. All right. Thank you, Ninja-san. But if I find that you are keeping more from us, I will be less than enthused. I understand. The boat ride over to the land of waves was uncomfortably silent, but Naruto knew better than to complain. The ninja they fought earlier may have been, well, a little too easy, and his first instinct was to completely dismiss any possibility of future attackers being any better, but Kakashi had reminded them that not only was Gato rich enough to hire much better ninja, Kiri-nin in particular were perfectly at home on the water. Just like Konoha-nin were in the trees. That puddle disguise would be a lot more effective in a land of frequent rain. So he kept his mouth shut, and he got the first glimpse of exactly what he was protecting. It didn't excuse Tsunade's lying or drunkenness, but Naruto could kinda understand his arrogance. The bridge, even only a quarter complete, was damn impressive. A lot more impressive than what was implied on the mission brief. Naruto might have been impressed by the bridge, and definitely agreed that it needed to be completed, but he still didn't like the man very much. Fortunately, they made it all the way to the docks without any incident. Tsunade still looked worried, though. I still have to make it home in one piece. They have to realize that those 2 haven't made it back yet. And if they didn't manage to complete their mission? Kakashi grimaced. Yes, it is worrisome. However, keep in mind that I am a jounin. Our mission may be the absolute worst. The bridge builder cringed. But we will complete it successfully. His eyes passed over his genin team. Not only were Sakura and Sasuke trained far more than practically any peacetime genin, but there weren't many ninja trained by Sannin. If they weren't that good, he would have turned around immediately after hearing the name Gato. No matter what the protests were, or how noble the mission was, it could have been reassigned. Gato may be civilian, and idiotic in the ways of ninja, but he was a genius when it came to the civilian world, and dangerous in that world. Also dangerous in the depth of his pockets. And that bridge did indeed look as important as Tsunade described it to be. But as they walked through the wilderness just outside the coastal town, Naruto turned his attention inward instead. You've been quiet lately. You've been busy lately. And pay attention. I know, but, alright. I have an idea, though. Later, brat. Naruto shivered, and there was a rustle in the bushes. Oh. In one single fluid, and panicked, motion, a kunai left his fingers. The entire team was instantly at attention. The sound of a knife against flesh was unmistakable. But Sasuke looked up. It's just a rabbit. Sakura was there a second later. Ugh. That's disgusting. Naruto's face lit up. Lunch. His two teammates stared at him like he was insane. But when he picked up the actual rabbit, and to his teammates' horror, finished it off without even pausing, he frowned. Naruto glanced questioningly at Kakashi. They both tensed. Sakura. Sasuke. Be ready. Naruto didn't even bother sealing the dead rabbit away, tossing it aside into the grass without even glancing at it. He was far too busy scanning the road, the trees, the river. Get down. Kakashi saw it first, and the three of them pulled Tsunade down with him while Kakashi simply dodged as a gigantic sword flew past at neck level. Well. Look what we have here. You must be even more desperate for money than I am if these little brats were all you could get. What? A man was now standing calmly on top of the sword, which was now stuck firmly in a tree. I didn't even see him move. Naruto's stomach turned. Kakashi can take this guy. Right?